Welcome back to Talking Sports by the Lake. I have a very special guest here with me today. We're going to be at the Lake House today to talk sports. It is finally time for us to start making the transition and talking to basketball. I have a good guest with me, Peyton Vince. Give them a little bit about yourself and where you're from and where they can find you at. You're muted.
There we
There
go.
we
Of
go.
course, technical difficulties at its finest, right? There we go. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I am the founder of the We Like Sports podcast. You can find us at our website. Our Twitter is at We Like Sports with a Z PC. The website is We Like Sports with a Z or We Like Sports PC.com, and that's www.weLikeSports with a Z still PC.com. And you could also follow me personally at Peyton Vince on Twitter, just my first and last name as seen there in the bottom left hand corner. And I guess in addition to that too, I'm also on the radio too out in Sandusky. So I do a little bit of everything, I guess.
Well, that's very interesting, and I'm glad to have you on. You are my very first basketball co host for today's show. So, you mentioned that you are born and raised in Cleveland. So, tell me about that and how that culminated into the things that you do now. Did you freeze?
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're. I can now. Yeah.
Did I cut out for a while then?
Yeah, you did. It's all right. We have technical difficulties every episode, so it's all right.
It's the new era of technology. Would you like me to start from the beginning again?
I mean, yeah, you can if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess it's take two, right? So I was saying, my name's Peyton Vince. I'm the founder of the We Like Sports podcast. You can find us on Twitter at We Like Sports with a Z PC, as well as our website, We Like Sports with a Z PC.com. We write sports articles. We feature a couple podcasts as well. In the future, our goals are to end up developing into another podcast network as well. We're all from Cleveland, Ohio, for the most part. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. You could find me on Twitter, just like my name in the bottom left hand corner, at Peyton Vince. And as well as all that other things as well, you could add that I'm also on the radio too out in Sandusky. So I do a little bit of everything overall. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to talk some Cavs and basketball all around.
You for coming on. People are calling me. It's been a busy day, but like you said, you are from Cleveland. So how did that shape your love for sports?
I guess you could say I'm a more rougher version of the podcast. I end up being featured for Cleveland wise, just because I know there's a lot of all Cleveland all around. I am personally a Cavaliers fan. I am also a Guardians fan, but for football, I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I grew up that way since the fourth
Boo!
grade, or not even the fourth grade, since I was four. I know I'm Cleveland guy in Ohio, in Cleveland. Most of us all from there, and I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And somehow, some way, the Steelers still managed to have a better playoff chance than the Browns did this year. I'm sorry, I had to take the shot, man.
Hey, some things are gonna come to an end, and it's gonna be real soon for you guys. But
We thought so. We thought so, but maybe they could surprise us once again.
maybe. But how many times can you reach into the Christmas basket to pull out a gift? Your time's gonna come at some point. But to focus on basketball, I know we're starting kind of late for the fans that are going to be watching this. But what was your reaction when we first brought in Donovan Mitchell?
So at the time, I was at work. We ended up. I was working at a card shop at the time in Strongsville, Ohio, and we ended up getting the news on our phones. We get the notifications, and it's the first time we hear about the trade that goes down for Donovan Mitchell. And ideally, we were all excited initially. and we didn't even know what pieces the Cavaliers gave up at the time to the Jazz, and if the move would have made sense. And I want to say that during a broadcast for the Cavs, Jim Jones said it best. With Donovan Mitchell, nobody really knew about him because they didn't have too many primetime games that were in need to be watched for TNT broadcasts. You knew about Donovan Mitchell, but you didn't know about his ability per se.
Hmm.
And for example, when he ends up dropping 71 points on national television as a member of the Cavaliers, now that kind of assured you that that was definitely the right move. The only downfall of that move, looking at it right now, is the fact that they don't have Laurie Markkinen, but that's worth the price, I guess, in the long run.
It's kind of funny that that's the story because for me, I like I was telling you about backstage, I do a lot of content creation, video editing. But when I go to work, I work for the Browns as a media member, media content member. But I also do security for other stadiums. So when I'm not working for
Oh,
the Browns or at their practice facility, things like that, I travel to different stadiums, schools, things like that to do events. And we had happened to be, I think this was week one, Penn State versus Purdue. We were on the bus over on our way over there, and everybody's quiet, got their headphones on, everybody's having their private conversation. The guys are sitting in the back, and we're talking sports, and I yell out, "Oh shit! Oh shit!" My phone's going off. Everybody start looking in the back of the bus. They're like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "The Cavs just traded for Donovan Mitchell." And then the front half of the bus was like, okay. The back half of the bus erupted and we're cheering. And then as we found out what was going on, everybody said, not Laurie Markkinen.
yep.
Um, so I'm definitely in agreement with that. I think that last year he was finally able to play in a position where he was most comfortable. And then you get to see him go play Euro ball in Euro competition and really blossom, so to speak, or we really got to see his game at a different way right before he got traded. So that leaves open our, in my opinion, our biggest hole coming into the season. And it's kind of played out that way. Um, what are some of the things that you have seen up to this point with this current roster?
Um, I guess you could say, to say the least, the difference between last year and this year, it's been drastic, and it's been seen as a good thing and both a bad thing too. If we're looking at it from a reality standpoint, you ended up seeing last year a lot of pick and roll basketball, Darius Garland to Evan Mobley or Jared Allen. And now this year, it kind of seems like it's a little bit lost. It seems like it's been forgotten, but it's also Donovan Mitchell playing as Donovan Mitchell. He's trying to fit in to the organization, to the team, when he's usually ball heavy, ball first point guard. And so is Darius Garland. So, like, that was going to be an issue going into the season, but you've definitely seen the difference. But ever since the groin injury and then the scuffle with Dylan Brooks, the Cavaliers looked like a lot more different of a team since then. Whether or not Donovan Mitchell, he was out with the groin injury, if he ended up picking up on what his role would be better suited as possibly. But I guess you could say early on, it just seemed like it was a lot more different style of basketball that Cleveland fans, Cavalier fans weren't used to compared to last year's version that got them into the playing game.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, I think I've noticed the same thing. I remember I don't know if it was something the commentators said during the game or something that came out on their YouTube as far as, talking to coaches and players. But BJ had to tell them to stop playing, Donovan Mitchell ball and Darius Garland ball. Like, we're going to find a way to get you guys the ball, but just go out there and have fun. We're in the early half of the season. There are a lot of things going on, and there are a lot of things we have to adjust to. And I think that really showed itself because, what was it, game one, game two, Darius Garland gets hit in the eye. He's out for
Yep.
2-3 weeks. He comes back, gets hit again. He's out for another 2-3 games. So there was that. And then once he got back, Evan Mobley had an ankle sprain. Jared Allen had a little something. A lot of guys were coming and going. And then right when they started to get that groove, they get Evan Mobley. I mean, not excuse me, not Evan Mobley, but they get Ricky Rubio back, and then there's that transition. And I think that although they still have to learn together, I think Ricky Rubio really showed how important he was. Not having him last year after the injury and so-called trade. Um, but moving forward, now that we've seen the team as they are right now with the trade deadline tomorrow at 3 p.m., are there any moves that you would want or expect?
Um, I mean, the only one that's really been talked about that's been intriguing to me is the talks of maybe getting Cam Reddish for a cheap price. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I could see Karis LeVert possibly on the move. I could possibly see Kevin Love being on the move, but you're also going to have to eat a lot of millions of dollars if that is the case. And then on top of that, I'm sure it's going to be a buyout in addition to him being traded away. So it just depends on whatever team would be interested in eating that amount of money, unfortunately. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the Cavaliers should make a trade, or I see any trade that stands out before tonight. I mean, maybe within the next couple of hours or so before the Cavs end up taking on Detroit tonight, maybe it's a possibility that they have something in the works right now as we speak,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see it happening at the at the deadline right before the time ends. I don't see it
Right.
happening.
Absolutely. I'm trying to get this out there. I'll tell anybody that listens. So, since we're doing this show together, I want to get your opinion on a guy that I feel like Karis LeVert would be a good move for. I like Karis LeVert. I just feel like there are moments where he's really, really good. And then there's moments where it's like, what are you doing? And
Yeah,
I
I mean with
would,
Karis LeVert too. I mean, I think it's just he's the right guy. He's the right player. It's just the wrong team. It doesn't make sense for him, and the expectations that the Cavaliers had last year going into acquiring him, it just seems like a good player. He's a good guy, good athlete. Just the wrong team. He's just so lost right here. He's the sixth man that in most teams he's going to be a starter.
right. Do you think that trading for Donovan Mitchell even made it even more of a made him even more of a movable piece because we have that level of scoring now at a consistent basis with him where we can put Garland on the bench early and bring him in or run him with Rubio or even Donovan Mitchell go to the bench and run him with Rubio and the backups.
I mean, I think that move for Mitchell has impacted Karis LeVert definitely, but I think last year you ended up seeing near the end of the year that he fit best coming off the bench,
Mm-hmm.
but also with all the injuries too that the Cavaliers ended up sustaining throughout this year so far, it makes sense why somebody like Karis LeVert has had great games. Like you've seen his numbers as a starter, he's getting 20 to 30 points a night as a starter. But coming off the bench, he's just not getting enough time. And I think no matter what move for Mitchell or not, I don't think Karis LeVert would still be viewed as a starter, even if that was the case. Because then I think you'd be looking at a lineup of which you knew last year, but you're probably going to end up swapping in somebody else along the lines of Ricky Rubio instead of Karis LeVert because you already know that Ricky Rubio has that veteran knowledge too. In addition,
Absolutely. So the guy I would want to move him for is Jonathan Isaac out of Orlando.
okay, and he's pretty young too. And on top of that too, I think I
Absolutely.
want to say he got drafted a couple years ago.
Yeah, he just came back from injury. That would be my only concern because if you remember in the bubble, he tore his ACL. I think he was out
Hmm.
like 910 days.
That's crazy.
Right, but at the same time, you're talking about a 6'8", 6'9" wing who can be a D and three kind of guy for us, which I think is the biggest piece that we need. Their contracts are somewhat similar. I feel like having another scorer for Orlando makes sense. I feel like there's some other guys at the bottom of the roster that we can move to, or some second round picks if we have any, that can entice the trade. But I definitely wanted to see what you thought about that before we go to the next thing.
I mean, with Jonathan Isaacs, or yeah, I want to say Isaac. With him, the move makes sense. It would be interesting. I wouldn't be against it. It would be kind of similar to the Cam Reddish thing. I think the thing is the biggest difference between the two of them is just because Jonathan Isaac was injured, like you said, 900 plus days. He was off the court almost 3 years, not playing due to an injury during COVID. And you don't know enough about him per se. But at the same time, the same goes for Cam Reddish because he has all this hype. He was a Duke product. He was one of the top 3 Duke products that year that he got drafted. That's the only thing that's really the investment with Cam Reddish. They're around the same age. I think we're both on the same terms, though, that the Cavaliers do need a wing. They need a 3. They need somebody overall. Isaac Okoro has been a surprise, but I don't think he's
Absolutely.
that guy.
Absolutely. And that was actually where I was going to transition next. I don't think Isaac Okoro is that guy. I think he's too small to guard threes, and he's not one of the elite defenders to go out and guard a 2 or a 1 every night. But the progress that we've seen him make, in my opinion, has been very, very flattering. So if we don't make a move, do you see this as something that can be sustainable for Okoro?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing is the biggest improvement that we've seen probably since roughly the new year is his 3 point game. He's ended up having more and more success from beyond the arc, which was unheard of. And I want to say he's shooting 40 to 50% this 2023 time of year within the last month and a half, 2 months or so now. And that's been the biggest key is he could play. He could have some nights. We've seen flashes of him last year when he was able to end up playing great defense, which that's the only thing I disagree with you on the defense. I think he could hold his own on the defensive end, but I understand why he could get overlooked too, just because his offense did. It was very underwhelming compared to his overhyped defense, I guess. So I could understand where you're coming from. But nonetheless, with Isaac Okoro, I think he could handle it on his own, and I think he could be a good 3 to end up finishing out the year if they don't make a trade. And if they do make a trade, he'd be a good 6th, 7th guy off the bench, depending on Dean Wade as your 6th man or possibly Okoro.
Absolutely. So that kind of leads into my next question, and I'm kind of going for BJ Bickerstaff here. I don't know if you watch the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show or if you have time to listen to ESPN 850 from time to time, but they've been asking the question, or I've been hearing the rumblings now about, is JB Bickerstaff the right coach to get these guys over the hump? What do you think about that?
So if you would have asked me about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I would say I have my doubts, extreme doubts, because I want to say within that last week and a half to 2 weeks ago, that was when he mismanaged that timeout situation. And there was literally, I want to say, 10 seconds left, and the Cavaliers could have ended up getting the ball once again, but he ended up just sitting on a timeout for the time being. And it just looked like he wasn't a good coach fitting at that time due to his time management. I mean, if you look at the game yesterday with LeBron breaking the NBA scoring record, you ended up seeing that it was smart time management by their head coach because you ended up having 2 timeouts and you're still able to challenge a play within the last 30 seconds of a game. It was still something that that was JB Bickerstaff's understanding or thoughts, I should say. But at the same time, it looks bad to the average fan that isn't thinking of the routes you need to end up having that challenge available in crunch time, possibly.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I'm torn. And the reason I'm torn is because if you look at BJ Bickerstaff's history with his father being in the league, he was an assistant over in Houston before they went with Paul Silas Jr. He ended up coming here. The thing that I try to point out to people is if you look at the guys that he has as far as young players, year 2, year 3, you start to see them blossom. Look how Garland opened up. Look how Okoro is opening up. Look at the way that Evan Mobley is starting to blossom and the way that he's starting to take charge when we get on the ball early in the game. With a lot of guys, we didn't really see that before. But at the same time, you could say the same thing with Mark Jackson out in New Orleans, not New Orleans, in Golden State, where development wise, you finally started to see the things you wanted to see out of Curry. You started to see Klay Thompson come into the Klay Thompson that we came to know. Same thing for Draymond. But was he the guy to get them over the hump? No, it was a Steve Kerr. So I'm kind of torn between the two. I I want to give him this year, the rest of this year, and majority of next year, if not all of next year, just because if you look back at last year when all those injuries happened, we got to remember that was his first playoff series and coaching period. So now you want him to make that next jump with no experience. But with that being said, something just came to mind that you brought up the idea of Kevin Love being a viable trade option. And I'm kind of against it only because I think that this is the time where Kevin Love realizes that he's got to change his game again. And I think he's a big glue guy as far as chemistry goes. But if we were to move him, who would you want to move him for?
I mean, honestly, that would be, I think, somebody that just gets packaged together with Karis LeVert. I don't think you can move Kevin Love alone. And the thing is why I mentioned that move is because he got announced this past week, or not even this past week, this past Sunday, that he's no longer in the rotation. And he's had a very up and down time throughout his Cavalier career, I guess you could say. You saw him as a starter. You saw him move to the bench. You saw him become a sixth man of the year almost candidate. And now this year he's lost in the shuffle again. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for him to end up changing his game a little bit. You have Dean Wade. That's a great option, though, when he is healthy. He showed a lot of great spurts, so I can't end up being disappointed in that move. But with Kevin Love, I think you can't have the guy that you're paying millions and millions of dollars because I think he still has 15 to maybe $20 million left on his contract. That's too much money to end up having for a player to end up sitting on the bench. Personally, for me, if you're even being paid 5 to 10 million and sitting on the bench, that's still too much money, especially for what he was known for as a member of the Timberwolves.
Absolutely. The reason I think he needs to refine his game or adjust his game is because he's not Andy Varejao. He can't sit there and take all those charges. The minutes that he was asked to play last year and in the beginning of this year, I think are starting to wear down on him. If I could get him in the game for 8 minutes a half, I feel like it would be very productive. But I'm pretty sure somebody will come in the comments about this one, but I think he has this year and next year left. If he were willing to resign for a smaller number, would you be willing to keep him around?
I mean, as you mentioned too, and I guess it was kind of forgotten about when I went on my little rant about Kevin Love, but with the being said though, Kevin Love is a great leader. He's a great veteran. He's essentially the Mike Napoli of the 2016 Indians. He's that leadership guy that is, like you said, the glue. That's the person that he has experience. He has playoff experience. He has finals experience. He has championship experience. He's a great veteran. I don't think you end up having the success the Cavaliers had this year and last year without Kevin Love. He's that key of a piece. If you could end up restructuring that number, yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd end up being all for it. Even if he's okay with sitting the bench and just being another coach, for example, like how your Zydrunas Ilgauskas is, your Anderson Varejao, as you mentioned, and kind of like how LeBron is currently. If you could be a coach on the bench without playing too often, or else when you're not in action, that's a great thing because JB Bickerstaff, the extra addition from a player's point of view, that I feel like could always be welcome no matter what team you're coaching.
Right. So this will be the last two questions before we get out of here. How did you feel about last night watching LeBron break the all-time scoring record in a Lakers jersey?
Uh, so I was watching the game. It was fun to watch. It was, I think, for his this part of his career, it makes sense the way it went down. I mean, you have him in a Lakers jersey. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it has that parallel. It has that exact parallel that he was a Laker player. You end up having the fact that if you were watching the game, you end up hearing the whole entire crowd erupt anytime LeBron's touching the ball, which
Hmm.
you could still get that in Cleveland. but now you're adding the effects of, do you really think that guys like Jay-Z, like Shannon Sharp, like all these, and that's just the two examples offhand, but all these celebrities that were at that game to watch the game, do you think LeBron's sons would even be at the game if it was in Cleveland? I think that's why the LA effect makes sense. I mean, within seconds, the Nike commercial came out for him. It just kind of made sense to the storybook ending to this part of LeBron's career. Obvi- Obviously, it's not over with yet. He still has plenty of time left in the league, I think. But I do think in the future, LeBron James does become a Cleveland Cavalier again. And if it's not that, I think he could go to the Thunder. I think that's a possibility. But I think this portion of his career, it makes sense of why it happened in LA. And I'm not too upset about it. I'm disappointed, but I'm not upset.
I agree. I have some interesting takes on this, so I'm going to break it into little parts here. I think that LeBron realized last night that if he had broke this record here, it would be different.
Hmm.
I understand the storybook moment of in a Lakers jersey, or if he didn't break it last night, he would broke it tonight against Milwaukee, where the captain was drafted. But I just think that looking back, I think LeBron was sold a bag of goods that were spoiled when it came to what the Lakers were willing to do and trying to do to surround him with the pieces that were needed. And I think that the Jay-Z's, the Denzels, the Shannon Sharps, I think they would have been there. And the reason I think they would have been there is this is something that the older generation that we just listed, excuse me, possibly got to see twice. But this is a once in a lifetime moment in NBA history. Because, in my opinion, when LeBron is done, there's nobody that's going to come close. Because, like, if you look up Steph Curry's all time career numbers right now, I think he's 35th. Durant is in the early 30s, late 20s. So
The
it's
only
like,
ones that could really do it is guys like Jason Tatum, and it's just because he's so young. If you end up looking at a prospect like Victor Wembanyama, for example, that might be the number one overall pick next year, he might be able to do it, but that's also because he's getting drafted at 18, 19, just like LeBron was. That's the only way that record could ever be broken, I think. And I think you're absolutely right with that.
absolutely. And then here's the other question to that before I get to the next one, because we got to get out of here. Do you think it won't be touched because of load management and the NBA continuously talking about bringing down the regular season number of games?
So with load management, I went on a rant on our website, the WeLikeSportsPC.com website, and it was about NBA load management. It's about the fact that you had fans travel to go see Steph Curry in Cleveland, 800 miles away, and he's sitting on the bench. You have Jimmy Butler having a fan excited to see him, 2,000 miles away allegedly, and sitting on the bench. The load
Mm-hmm.
management thing is not for me. The back to back thing, that's just an excuse. I could see them shortening the number of games, which, I mean, 82 games is fine. It's always been fine. If anything, just extend the season even longer. Cut out the preseason games. Nobody really watches them, and the last 2 to 3 don't really matter. The last two, especially. I think that's the only way to approach it. And you could kind of lay out that schedule a bit more easier and easier on the body. But I don't think it makes sense to shorten the extension of the season. It should just be 80, 82, and that should be the way it is. It's kind of like the baseball season. You're just used to that amount of games. There's no point in changing it.
Absolutely. So this will be the last question. What are your predictions for the second half of the year as far as the Cavs go?
Um, Second half of the year, I mean, I think if we're looking far ahead, I think they're without a doubt a playoff team. I think they're probably going to end up. I know the Nets were sitting around the 4 spot for a while. That was before they ended up trading Kyrie Irving to Dallas. Depending on how Cam Thomas does, maybe that's a possibility, and the only way the Nets end up remaining on the 4. But I think the Cavs are. I think you're looking at the 2 or 3 seed in the East by the time the year's done. So far in the second half, if like I said, if Donovan Mitchell figured out his piece in the team, if he ended up understanding while he was out what part he plays, and if the last couple of games since the Grizzlies game has been any indication, I think we're in for a really good second half of the season. including with the All-Star break too. I don't think that's going to kill momentum. I think we're going to be in good shape as Cavaliers fans, and I think we're going to be looking at a 2 or 3 seed. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavaliers win the NBA Finals. Truth be told.
Absolutely. I don't think it'll go that well. I definitely hope it would. And but I think depending on where Milwaukee and Boston fall, will dictate where we go. I have us in the conference finals. Depending
Okay.
on where seeding goes, I think there's an injury here or there that'll get us at least to the conference finals, if not the NBA finals. I'm not really worried about Philly just because I don't trust James Harden. And
Right.
with Brooklyn falling out of the way, who else is going to really pass us? Toronto is talking about selling. They haven't been very well this year. Boston, they're looking to make a move as we speak right now. So there are a lot of other things that are going to shake it up and make some changes, but I think that's where it's going to end up for us. But as we get out of here, I want to definitely say thank you for coming to the Lake House and talking sports. I'll give you one more chance to tell everybody where they can find you, how to find you on Twitter, your website. So go ahead.
Well, thank you again for having me, Evan. I appreciate it. Like I mentioned earlier on, I'm the founder of the We Like Sports podcast. You can find us on Twitter at We Like Sports with a ZPC. You can check out our website as well, We Like Sports with a ZPC.com. You can find me on Twitter as well. Yeah, it's just my first name, last name, like you could see in the video. But if you want to end up searching and save yourself some time, at Peyton Vince. And anytime interacting Cavaliers, Guardians, Browns, even Steelers specifically for me, though. I mean, either way, I'm watching sports one way or another, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the future is for Cleveland sports, I guess, including the Browns at the end of the day.
Absolutely. It's like I said, man, thanks for coming to the Lake House. I would love to have you on again, even join
Yeah,
your side of the
absolutely.
podcast and be a guest for you. Those are things we can work out at another time. But again, thanks for coming to the Lake House. For everybody else, man, we're about to set sail and go watch the Cavs versus the Pistons tonight. And
Guess I could represent the T-shirt too, really quick.
oh yeah, definitely.
I
So we're gonna
forgot I was
set
wearing
sail.
it.
Say it again.
I said I forgot I was wearing it.
So as he has this dope shirt, we're going to definitely go set sail, get ready for the game tonight. I hope everybody enjoys. Thanks for coming to the Lake House, and we will see you guys soon.
Curry, they give the three. No.